Let me see. All right, let me see. Hi, I'm trying to make sure. I hope this works for Instagram. Yay, it works. Okay, cool. So, um, hi, beautiful people. If you are watching me on the replay, thank you so much for watching me. Yay, it works. Okay, cool. So, see. Hi, beautiful people. If you are watching me on the replay, 1 second. Thank you so much for watching me. Yay, it works. Okay, cool. So, see. Hi, beautiful people. Oh, that's a huge one. Okay. All right. Hi. um, if you're watching me on a replay, thank you for watching me. I'm streaming on literally all social media platforms. Um, if you want to know how I'm doing it, there's this platform called StreamYard. It allows you to go on multiple platforms except for TikTok. So I have a different device for TikTok. But my name is Celeste. I'm a therapist from Boston. And I come on Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time, to talk about a subject we all go through and then talk about ways to deal with it. And I used to do this back in like 2017, 2016, 5 days a week. And I would go live on all platforms and talk about things. That's how I started to build a platform. And in 2018, I created a podcast where I started talking to people that are empowering people and sharing their story. So today, the topic I want to talk about is success and thinking about like how you define success for your life. That's something that I don't think people understand. Uh, is based off of things that they may have been told success was, or things that society has said. And if you grew up in America, a lot of ways that we have defined success is our accolades, degrees, houses, like what we have, right? There's so many commercials that will, like, for example, bring up a phone and your phone may be working fine, but then, you know, the commercial says, but it doesn't have these cameras or it doesn't have this. And so, unfortunately, that's when we begin to say like, oh my god, like our phone is not good enough, we need to have a different phone, right? That's just one example on how we tend to um, look at success in the way that society has deemed success is. And doing this, right? So everybody's going to want something different. We're all uniquely and wonderfully made, and we don't realize this. And everybody's wants. Some people may not even realize they don't want kids, or they may not want to be married, or they may not even want to be in a relationship. But a lot of times, these ideas of like what life should look like is thrown at us. I've been working with people for so long. I notice when people are going from 29 to 30, there's this crisis that takes place within. And a lot of times that's happening because it's like, oh, I didn't think my life would look like this, right? And so a lot of times we don't recognize how we have these expectations on like what life should look like, instead of looking at what life is. And if it's not what we want it to be, how can we reshape that? But a lot of times it's not about like, is this what I want my life to be like? But is this what it should be like? So nowhere in the mix of success, right? So, because today I want you to think about how you redefine success so that you cannot feel so miserable about the things you don't have. And nowhere in success or the definition of success have we thought about like our internal self, right? Um, there's a lot of things in our society, like there's a lot of rich people, there's a lot of people with money that are very miserable, right? People are miserable. And I think about America, like we have so many things, we have so much product, but we are riddled with so much depression and anxiety here. And I think a lot of it is like a lot of information overload. And don't get me wrong, I do know money is helpful for purchasing things to have our essential needs met. Like I do believe that's true, but I also believe what's true is that we can have our essential needs met and still find ourselves struggling with what we don't have. And so if you're finding yourself unsatisfied with life, right? because a lot of people feel unsatisfied or don't feel whole, like feeling like something's off, can't quite pinpoint it, right? That has to be hard to not feel like you can pinpoint what it is or feel like there's always something happening. I really want you to think about things that you can do to help yourself try to identify like what that thing is, like what's holding you back. Because if I ask people, like, would you want to have peace in life? Everybody would say yes. But we're not doing the things that we need to do to help ourselves achieve peace, right? And a lot of times that starts with like looking within. And looking within is really hard to do. And it's so hard to do because we've never been taught. We're dealing with something we cannot see when you're talking about looking within, like we can't see the emotions. But if we actually pause and work on paying attention to what's happening, we can feel it in our bodies, right? Our bodies tell us when we're not okay. Our bodies will tell us when we're uncomfortable. But a lot of times we don't realize that that's what's happening because over the years, like we have ignored the signs that our body has given us to let us know we're okay, to let us know like what we need. And I don't like to say like it's anybody's fault, right? That we weren't taught, regardless of why we weren't taught or why it's happened. It's really important to understand it's our responsibility to be okay. It's our responsibility to create change in our lives. And I really believe that if you're still breathing, there's room for change. It's just something that I truly believe. So I'm going to think about solutions. I'm going to give you solutions to think about how you can work on defining like what success looks like. So the first thing I want you to think about is understanding your current narrative of where success comes from, like where this idea of success comes from. Because a lot of people that are feeling unhappy or feeling unfulfilled, a lot of it has to do with things or where you are in life or where you're not in life, but not realizing like where it comes from. I grew up in a time where we talked about school as a thing for success, like you got to get this degree. I think about the setup for how, I'm 17, 18 years old. I can easily get a student loan for $40,000, $50,000, right? If I ask the bank for $10,000 to start a business, like I can't get that. I don't got enough credit, but I got enough credit to go into debt, $40,000, $50,000. Luckily for me, like I went into a career field that allowed me to make money, right, with my degree. But I recognize like, cause I'm 41. So, high school was like late 90s, when I'm in high school and the narrative is get a degree, which is why we have so much emptiness in the trades, right? There's not in the trades. You got people that go to trade school and they come out of trade school with no debt or very little debt. And they're making like more money than people who spent 4 years in school and have like all of this debt, right? So when I think about the first solution to when it comes to how do I redefine what success looks like, I need to understand my narrative. Am I still trying to like get into school because I feel like if I don't have a degree, like who am I? And I know certain cultures, this is a big deal, like to have a degree in the culture, right? Because I do think years ago, places did require degrees, right? A lot of places don't anymore. So that's number one. Number two, there's something powerful about having gratitude. Having gratitude is so underestimated for us. Um, when you're able to like pause and be thankful for what is or what you have, it's hard to find yourself struggling for what you don't have, right? And it's the little things, right? And I think that we miss out on the little things, on how we can work on being grateful. So when I think about how do I define success, I need to start with like looking at my life, looking at where I'm at in life, because you can't be anywhere than where you are today. It is what it is, regardless of if it's not where you want to be. And being able to like find gratitude in the space that you're in, that's important. Number three, creating a system where you're taking care of yourself and being intentional. This is where people miss the mark. I seen this reel of a girl asking her like 102-year-old Jamaican grandmother about like the secret to life. And the grandmother said, you know, it's important to love yourself. Over the years, I learned how to love myself, and I recognize that people don't realize what they deserve, right? They don't know what that looks like. And a lot of times, I don't even think we realize we don't love ourselves. But if we can look at the actions that we're creating for ourselves, if we can look at how we hold ourselves back, if we can look at our lack of discipline with ourselves and not keeping our word with ourselves, we'll keep word with other people. Somebody need us, we're jumping and we're going. But when it comes to ourselves, like a lot of times people miss the mark. So if we can actually look at like how we're treating ourselves, we can actually identify like whether or not we do love ourselves. And a lot of times like we miss the mark. So when I think about like defining success, it's so important to make sure that you are being very intentional on caring for yourself. And it really just starts with the basics. I think when you want to like work on being intentional on loving yourself, sometimes people think about monetary things. Oh, what do I need to buy? Or like I need to get my hair done, my nail. Like I don't want you to think about it in that way. I want you to think about it in the way of like, okay, am I waking up on time so I'm not rushing into work, right? Am I organizing my space, right? Did I wake up and make up my bed? Those kind of things. Like, did I take time to pause and reflect on what I'm feeling, right? Am I acknowledging my needs and my feelings? Like, those are the things when I think about how am I taking care of myself, I really want you to think about internally, like, how am I taking care of myself internally? The next thing I want you to think about is stop looking for validation through people or social media. Work on living your life. That's a huge one. Even if it's not social media, because everybody is not looking at validation in social media. But what I do think that people are looking for validation in people, like people in their lives. And validation is great. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, when I first started talking about mental health, I didn't get much validation because it wasn't like a popular thing. But that wasn't the thing that drove me. What drove me is like understanding my purpose, understanding like working on your mental health is a thing that's important and that it works, right? Because it worked for me. So I'm like, I want to tell the people. And so my drive was like being aware of my purpose. And that drove me, right? I get a lot of validation now, but if I waited for that validation, I know I wouldn't be where I'm at today, right? So it's not that I'm saying validation is a bad thing, but what I'm saying is like not waiting for validation, especially if you're starting to understand your purpose. And it may not be something that is familiar. It may not be something that's popular, but it's important, right? And the last thing I'll say about this idea of success in working on defining what that looks like for you, it's so important that you are patient with yourself in the process. A lot of times, like we get really like, we'll get motivated and excited and want to do something that's going to help us. But then we struggle with the process. If you have been somebody that has not taken care of yourself regularly, not prioritized your needs, not loved yourself, always did things based off of like what your family said you should do, what society says you should do, and you're like, you know what, I'm about to change and be like mindful and do what I love, your system is going to be like, whoa, what's happening, right? You're going to feel like you're in a battle with yourself. Anytime you're trying to make change, even if it's a good change, like I think trying to take care of yourself is a good thing. But even if it's a good thing that you're trying to do for yourself, you're going to find yourself battling. You're also going to find yourself struggling with being consistent, right? A lot of times people say, like, I don't know how to be consistent or I'm not consistent. And I'm like, you do have the ability to be consistent. Like, you're consistently like not taking care of yourself, or you're consistently like doing all these things for other people. So the ability to be consistent is there. But when you try to put it for yourself, that's the part that's hard, because you're not used to it. And so you're literally introducing something foreign into your system, and it's like wanting to reject it. And so when the intentionality comes into play, right? So if you can work on being intentional about the process, you're working on teaching your mind, your body, your spirit that this is for me. This is the direction that we're going. And it happens with what you say you're going to do, right? So there's a lot of power in the words and what you say, like really being mindful on how you are defining things for yourself. Because a lot of times we don't understand, we set ourselves up for anxiety. We set ourselves up for not a successful day, where we'll wake up on a Monday morning and be like, oh my gosh, it's Monday. Like it's going to be so, or if it's raining, like, oh my God, this day is going to suck. You know, saying something like that, like, oh my gosh, it's Monday, or oh my God, this day's going to suck. Guess what's going to happen? Your mind is going to look for ways that your day can be sucky. It's going to look for ways for you to be filled with so much anxiety. And that's because like our mind only goes at the direction we take it. And when people talk about surrounding yourself with good people, or what are you feeding your mind? I just learned that the TikTok, hi TikTok, yes, it's so accurate. I just learned that the TikTok in Japan is different than the TikTok in the USA, because I've been like really watching. I've been really watching because you know how they're trying to ban it, and they have a more educational like system for their feed, right? And in America, like obviously everything goes, and it's really important to understand that the things that we surround ourselves, like Japan is mindful, like they want their people to be educated and all these other things, right? And here, you know, in America, you know, I'm always going to say it. We want to make sure, not we, America wants to make sure that we feel insecure, that we feel like we don't have enough, that we're depressed, that we're anxious, because if we can do that, they can continue to benefit off of it. Capitalism, right? So it's really important to be mindful as you're working on change and creating and designing what success looks like for you. It's really important to be patient with yourself and to be very, very intentional. Because if you're not intentional, if you wake up not intentional, if you just like plan to fail, no, fail to plan, then you're planning to fail. Because guess what's going to happen? Society is going to take over. Your mind is going to go at the direction of society. Unless you live in a Buddhist nation, we live in a very capitalistic nation. It's going to continue to help make us believe that we don't have enough and we're not successful. There are people that have gotten PhDs that make enough money to survive and have all of their needs met, and they're struggling, right? So it's not just about that that's keeping us from where we want to be, and that's like having peace. There are so many other things, and it's the way that we're framing it in our head. And so, and I've been to a lot of countries where they don't have as much as we have, and I find their level of happiness or peace looks different. And a lot of that happens is because of the way they're shifting their mindset, right? They're adding gratitude in their mindset. So I hope this was helpful. I hope this makes sense. If anything I ever say resonates for you, like try to work on being intentional to change. You know, we just talked about success and redefining it and what that looks like for you. And if this is something that you're like, yeah, you know what, I really need to rethink that and look at that, like continue to do the process, because your mind's going to help you see the possibilities. Like I'm always going to say that the same way you may see the car that you drive all the time because your mind is so used to seeing it, the same way you may find yourself feeling anxious all the time because of the way you're thinking. So your mind is keeping you in a state of anxiety. But if you start to rethink and try to challenge yourself around the way that you're thinking, around success, around peace, right? If you continue to do that intentionally, your mind will begin to look for the possibilities for peace. Your mind will begin to look for the possibilities to not be so anxious. And your mind will begin to look at the possibilities and reframing what success is for you. So thank you so much for tuning in. This episode is going to be on the podcast. So if you only have followed me on social media, there's a podcast. And if you go to celestethetherapist.com, you can find the links to the podcast. I'm on YouTube. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud. So if you do listen to podcasts, you can find a ton of podcasts from me. And if you're not following me on all social media platforms, all you got to do is search Celeste the Therapist. So I will see you guys next Wednesday. Thank you so much for tuning in.